What happens when you bring a franchise to a new generation? Do you abandon the backdrop of what makes your series so great in favor of something new? Or do you play it safe, don't take too many risks, and stick to a tried and mostly true formula that stood the test of time? Well, there actually is a third option, and that's going for a weird hybrid of both. And that's where I feel that Gran Turismo Sport has found itself. GT Sport was marketed as a radical new direction of the GT franchise, but diving into it, I felt that I was experiencing more of the same Gran Turismo that I've been experiencing for the past decade, for better and for worse. GT Sport is the 7th main installment in PlayStation's flagship series, but Polyphony Digital has emphasized repeatedly that this is not Gran Turismo 7. This is a different kind of title, looking to focus more on the online competition as opposed to the previous title's Pokemon on Wheels mentality. One of the biggest draws of this newest iteration in the series is a partnership with the FIA to create officially sanctioned online championships. In terms of content, GT Sport is one of the most pared down titles in the entire series. At a hair over 160 cars and 17 tracks with only 6 real-world circuits, this is one of the lowest car and track counts in the series, second only to the original Gran Turismo. On the bright side, there is finally no premium or standard car divide that was present in Gran Turismo 5 and 6. However, going from nearly 400 premium cars in GT6 to less than half that in GT Sport makes me feel like we've been kind of slighted in content. Fortunately, Polyphony Digital has stated that there will be free DLC content being released for the title, bringing more cars and tracks to boost the count. So far, the latest patch has added 3 new cars to GT Sport, and over 50 cars are planned for addition before March 2018. However, there is still no word on how many tracks will be added, which I think is more necessary than the cars. The cars in Gran Turismo Sport are split into 6 classes based on their performance. The classes are Group N, Group 4, Group 3, Group 1, Group B, and Group X. Group N are the conventional road cars and are split into different subdivisions based on performance. Group 4 is like GT4, Group 3 is like GT3, Group 1 is similar to LMP prototypes, B is for rally cars, and Group X is for the extreme cars, mostly consisting of Vision GT cars. Mixed in with the real-world race cars are semi-fictional race cars, as well as the outlandish Vision GT cars converted into different classes. While this idea does a great job boosting the variety of cars available, I find it kind of weird racing in a GT3 race that features a GT3 Volkswagen Beetle racing alongside a Toyota Vision GT3 race car. For some people, they might like the variety, but I kind of find it jarring myself. Here's another fun fact. Only 2 cars in the entire GT Sport roster date back further than 2002, the Shelby Cobra and the Audi Quattro Group B rally car. Fortunately, this issue is looking to be remedied as well, with more classic cars being added in December and hopefully more to come. One thing I do want to point out in GT Sport though is there is not too much incentive to actively purchase and collect cars. As mentioned earlier in this review, one of the draws of the Gran Turismo series was to buy and collect a variety of different cars. In GT Sport, there isn't really much incentive. In most of the single-player modes, such as the driving challenges, you are supplied with a car. In a few of the online race modes, you're also going to be supplied with a car to drive. For the Group 3 and Group 4 races, you can register with a manufacturer to get a GT3 and GT4 car. Adding in the reward cards you can obtain from leveling up and progressing through missions and challenges, it almost feels like Gran Turismo Sport discourages you from buying cars. You will still need your own cars for custom races and custom lobbies, but in other modes, you can squeak by without having to buy a car. Also note that the upcoming single-player GT League mode will completely change the way progression works in GT Sport, and will also change the way you buy and use cars in the game, so keep that in mind. As mentioned earlier, track content is quite limited. Only 17 circuits are included in GT Sport, and 6 are real-world tracks. Even with the multiple layouts, that number is only about the 40 mark. That is a stark drop from the 41 tracks and 86 layouts present in Gran Turismo 6. Tracks such as Laguna Seca, Monza, Spa, and many more are sore omissions from GT Sport that were present in its predecessor. With a lower track count, the roster can quickly feel repetitive. Hopefully, they'll inject quite a few more tracks in as time goes, but for now, the track roster is definitely one of the biggest detriments to the title. The Gran Turismo series has been synonymous with good-looking racing, and GT Sport is no exception. In some situations, Gran Turismo Sport is easily one of the best-looking titles in all of sim racing. For example, replays look incredible and are at the point where, from a distance, you might confuse them for real-life racing in some situations. However, I feel that some of the cockpits are a little lackluster, but all in all, GT Sport is an incredible looking title. Now, let's get on to one of the big questions. How does GT Sport drive? And the simple answer to that is, like Gran Turismo. If you're driving Gran Turismo 6, or heck, even GT5, you have a basic idea on how Sport is going to be. In terms of physics and driving mechanics, they feel authentic, but not dynamic. In this latest generation of racing sims, the emphasis is on creating dynamic racing environments, dynamic tires, tracks, time of day, weather, and so on. To my knowledge, GT Sport has none of that. Tires wear, but they aren't on the scale of realism as R Factor 2, Assetto Corsa, or even Project Cars 2. Time of day is now static and doesn't progress over the course of a race. In terms of vehicle behavior, it's pretty decent. The cars feel like they have some weight to them, momentum shifting is pretty solid, and you have to be careful not to abuse the car or else you'll lose control. However, there are still some issues I've had ever since Gran Turismo 5 Prologue, and they're still here. Proper clutch support is still absent, with the clutch being recognized more as an on and off switch rather than an axis. In turn, you have to be very deliberate with your shifts, or else you will miss them far too easily. Handbrake support is limited as well, but as of right now, only the Club Sport handbrake with the CSL Elite PS4 can even handle that. And speaking of the CSL Elite PS4, that brings me to another issue I have, and that's fairly limited wheel support. I've done my testing in GT Sport with the Thrustmaster T500 RS, Fanatec CSL Elite PS4, and the Club Sport Wheel 2.5 with the Cronus Max Drive Hub. The T500 RS is the only wheel I currently have to feature full support for GT Sport, and the Fanatec CSL Elite PS4 has to be run in compatibility mode. While I preferred the CSL Elite and Club Sport wheel to drive in GT Sport, it lacks a lot of the functionality of Thrustmaster products, such as the D-pad quick settings, so I would need to actually use the PS4 gamepad to adjust the settings. I will be getting a Thrustmaster TGT soon, so I will do more testing with that, but hopefully more support for the CSL Elite PS4 and other wheels will come soon. Another major addition I want to touch on is the inclusion of a livery editor to GT Sport. Finally! Now you can create your own custom paint schemes, and it's an interface that will feel quite similar to the interface used in Forza Motorsport titles, which is quite welcome. Also, a great feature is now you are able to upload your own logos in SVG format to implement into your own liveries. Another thing we need to highlight is the online racing, as that's where most of the focus is currently for GT Sport. The online racing system works fairly well. Your driver rating is split into two segments, the sportsmanship rating and the driver rating. Your your sportsmanship rating increases as you prove yourself as a safe driver, and your driver rating is relative to your own driving skill. For the most part, it works well, and matchmaking puts you into races of like skill. However, I still feel like we get what I like to call public lobby-itis, and we have had multiple times when I got rammed off the road just by a crazy driver. In addition, the public racings are also without damage, so that gives racers a bit more of an incentive to ram others off the road. I've had better luck doing custom races with damage on, which resulted in fun experiences. Another thing I want to mention is online races. They do have this function where if a driver is being overly reckless, they will make that driver ghost, aka go through other cars. So that can work well at times, but that is a bit of a detriment to the realism. Note that in custom lobbies, you can turn that off at least. Now, before we get to the pros and cons, I want to share a few quick thoughts. Photo mode makes its return and still works great. However, it still has what I like to call the magic camera, where you can use highly unrealistic camera settings and still get solid shots. Damage is still an afterthought for Gran Turismo. In the majority of races, it's off by default, and even when you have it turned on to heavy, it is still fairly limited. The user interface and menus are some of the best looking in all of sim racing. While at times the navigation can still be a little tricky to learn everything, once you figure out the menu system, it works fairly well. Sounds have had a solid improvement over the Gran Turismo titles, but can still lag behind other titles. The vacuum cleaner sound is not nearly as prevalent, but you can still tell the sounds are quite digitized. There are a couple ovals in GT Sport, but it's more of a why the heck did they add that in? Whenever I've done an online race on an oval, it just turns out completely crazy. Rally racing is also implemented, but again, it feels a bit like an afterthought, which is a shame as the dirt physics feel relatively decent. My final note is, in a couple months, GT Sport will likely be wildly different than what we are currently playing, with the new features, new cars, and possibly new tracks being added. I think that just about covers it, so let's now get on to the pros and cons. And like always, let's just start with the pros. One of the best looking racing games, period. Beautiful UI and menus. Finally adding a livery editor with the ability to add custom logos. Photo mode is still one of the best in all of sim racing. Online ranking system usually works pretty well. The driving school and challenges can be pretty fun and addictive when you're trying to get gold. And now here are the cons. Physics have had little progression from previous titles. Clutch and handbrake support are still not properly simulated. The car and track roster is horribly limited. Damage is still quite lackluster. Rally racing feels a bit like an afterthought. Limited hardware support. Single player is limited. Now, let's get to the bottom line. Do I recommend Gran Turismo Sport? Well, that's going to be based on a couple factors. Do you enjoy the Gran Turismo series and are wanting to do racing online? Then I think you would enjoy GT Sport. Are you looking for a generational leap in quality with great improvements in physics, sounds, and damage? Then you're gonna be left a little disappointed. Fortunately, it sounds like GT Sport is going to be adding a lot of new features and functionality to the title in the coming months. For example, December will bring GT League, which will greatly flesh out the single player experience. I will likely do a follow-up video in the first half of 2018 to see how GT Sport has evolved, but for most people, I'd recommend waiting for GT Sport to come on sale. So I hope you enjoyed my review on Gran Turismo Sport, and I would love to hear your thoughts. What did you think of GT Sport so far? Are you planning on picking it up? Let us know in the comments below. Also, if you like this video, please hit that like and subscribe button down below and help keep us on track. For the Sim Racing Paddock, I'm William Marsh, and you have a great rest of your day.